Well, welcome to Perspectives Online and on air from WFSU Public Media. I'm Tom Flanigan, and if you notice, this is Wednesday, and that is a rather non-traditional day for us to be doing the Perspectives program, but this is a very special edition of the show. For one thing, we are originating the program from our WFSU studios. This is the first time in just over 3 months we've done that, and that's to make sure that you can chime in on a matter of great importance, not just in our community, but also nationwide. But in light of the ongoing need to socially distance and be safe, our guests are appearing via Zoom, and you are certainly invited to be part of the conversation as well at 850-414-1234. Our email, perspectives@wfsu.org. You can tweet us at WFSU Perspective. That is without the S. The topic is the future of policing in Tallahassee, and with us to talk about it, Tallahassee City Manager Reese Goad joins us via Zoom. And Mr. Manager, it is so good to see you. Someday it's going to happen, sir. We also have with us your deputy city manager for the city of Tallahassee, Cynthia Barber. She joins us via Zoom as well. Hi, Ms. Deputy Manager. Good to see you, too.
Good morning. Good to see you as well.
We are so delighted that you could join us, ma'am. City of Tallahassee Attorney Cassandra Jackson is also with us this morning via Zoom. And it is a delight, ma'am, with the Dean Joya picture in the background. That makes it absolutely certain that we are in Florida's capital city. Good to see you, ma'am.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
And we also have with us Tallahassee Police Chief Lawrence Revell, who joins us from that office over there on 6th Avenue and TPD headquarters. Chief Revell, thank you for coming on board, sir. Good to see you. Well, we are talking about a situation that has engendered so much controversy. I know you folks last night, some of you were involved in a kind of forum on the same subject, courtesy of the Village Square. And if I guess we could talk about exactly where we are in the overall discussion. Let's defer to the city manager on this one, since Reese, you kind of are the bus driver when it comes to a lot of the discussion on this, because so much of it has to do with what is possible under current city charter and a host of other issues. But where do we stand on a process of at least revisiting the current makeup of the Tallahassee Police Department and what it does and how it does what it does? Where are we, sir?
Well, Tom, I thank you for that question. I really would like to tag team that with the city attorney as well, because I think we're talking about the citizen review board in particular. And it really is, the thrust of it is to bring in more public participation in our process of policing. We have one of the most respected police departments in the country, frankly. The second oldest accredited, longest running accredited agency. But we must look forward. Chief Revell, I'm sure in this conversation will share many of the things that he's doing to pull more citizens' comments and feedback and participation in our processes. And where we are specifically as it relates to a citizens review board is the city commission has taken it upon themselves to initiate that. It will be done via ordinance, which becomes part of local law. That ordinance has been crafted, or at least the framework of the ordinance will be crafted by the city attorney. And it's based on citizen review boards throughout the state and really referenced throughout our country. It will be done within the framework of the laws of the state of Florida to make sure it operates appropriately, but have enough independence, objectivity, and really authority to do a good job to make sure we get the voice of our citizens in the process. And I know that's something I don't want to speak for them, but our chief of police has embraced the same one, talking about additional citizen input, because we must look forward to be progressive. We tend to be the leader in Tallahassee for the state of Florida and really around the country. And that's not limited to our police department, but it is consistent.
Okay, well, since you name-checked Chief Revell, if we could ask you, sir, What kind of feedback are you getting from the citizenry? And we're not just talking about the recent Tony McDade case. We're talking about the ongoing sorts of feedback that you get from the citizenry on what is happening with the Tallahassee police chief in regard, or police department, in regards, especially when it comes to race relations in this town. Before we move on in the discussion, Chief, as long as we're sitting in your office there with you, an email that came in from Brittany said she's a nurse in Tallahassee. She has a bunch of questions, but she wanted to limit the scope of her inquiry to particularly your thoughts on when it comes to the training component, the recruitment of new officers, and how do you make sure you have the very best men and women possible out into the community? And are there certain things that you would like perhaps pulled out of the policing portfolio, if you will? Things like, calls for more mental health help for suspects. Maybe we should call a counselor rather than a cop on the beat in some cases. What are your thoughts on those things?
Evaluation with a psychologist. That incorporates all of our implicit bias, all of our de-escalation, all of our fair and impartial policing training, as well as the curriculum, the mandatory training, the high liability stuff that FDLE mandates. that we train on that. But we incorporate especially de-escalation into every scenario that we do in our in-service training. So I will be the first to say we can never get enough training. We can never train our people enough. I'm very proud to say that 2/3 of all of our officers, sworn officers, have critical incident training, which specifically deals with how officers relate to people with mental challenges. So our officers are trained in that and deal with that. But to go to the second part of your question, police have over the years evolved into kind of a cure-all for society, and we respond to mental health calls. We respond to we're marriage counselors, we're crisis counselors, as well as the police work. And so, is there room for others to come in and get involved and help us in those things and take police out of it, so that one of the concepts that came up last night, or one of the topics, was the over policing of certain neighborhoods, and by taking some of those things and refocusing people that may have a better have more training or a better ability to deal with certain type of situations, especially where the mentally ill are concerned, that's a resource that we welcome. We certainly need to make sure that those people are safe in doing that and rendering those. I'm very excited about a community service technician program that we're doing, which are civilians, which will help us, again, have civilians answering the more minor calls that don't involve, any violence, and that'll put, again, take some of that burden off of our police officers and some of the different types of calls. And that's that's an area where we could certainly put a mental health person, with that community service technician, and they could respond to those type of calls first. And, they have radios, and also if there were a need for a police officer, then they could be called to the situation later. So, again, the Tallahassee Police Department and the city of Tallahassee are truly forward thinking on many of these things, and we're looking to push that even further.
Our special live edition of Perspectives, online and on air from WFSU Public Media, the future of policing in Florida's capital city, with Tallahassee City Manager Reese Goad, Tallahassee Deputy City Manager Cynthia Barber, our Tallahassee City Attorney Cassandra Jackson, and Tallahassee Police Chief Lawrence Revell. And you can be part of the action too, 850-414-1234, or send us an email, perspectives@wfsu.org. To the phones we go. Let's go to line 2. Reed is joining us for the first time in like 3 months. Hi, Reed. Hello, Reed.
Hello, Tom.
Are you surviving, sir?
Hey, I'm out in the country communing with the mosquitoes. It's a lovely morning. It really is. I don't know how many people besides you and me on your panel are old enough to remember Hill Street Blues. But I remember when that show started, the precinct sergeant every morning would finish his lecture to the officers by saying, "Let's be careful out there." Michael Conrad was that actor. He died. The guy who replaced him would finish that same scene with, "Let's do it to them before they do it to us." I think, Tom, And I'm afraid that adversarial attitude is pervasive among way too many police forces in this country today. I don't know about TPD, although I do know that TPD and I have had some personal conflicts, and one of their discredited officers who was fired and charged with crimes was a part of that, and I'm still fighting that battle. But anyway, my concern is accountability. And I'm wondering how we reward the officers who accept the responsibility correctly, knowing that their lives are on the line, knowing how deep their commitment has to be in order to do the job, and take away the power from those who just want that badge to be a shield against incrimination or criminal charges or backlash. I think this George Floyd scenario proved that there are some of these guys that think that, they put on that uniform, they're bulletproof. We got to change that. And I think maybe the police union representation is the biggest problem in that. And I'd like to hear what Chief Revell and your other guests had to say about that.
Okay, thanks so much, Reed. Chief, if you want to start that off, and then I think maybe the city attorney might have some input on that as well, or perhaps Cynthia Barber, the deputy city manager. Chief?
Yeah, thank you. There is nobody that hates abuse of power more than myself or more than police officers in general, because that does paint a picture on all police officers that is just not fair, because we have the best men and women in the country working for us at the Tallahassee Police Department. And I believe that. I say that all the time. Men and women that want to do right, that try to do right each and every day, that love this job and are called. It's a true calling for them to do it. So nobody wants to root out that those bad apples more than we do. When those things happen, we have things in place, that alerts in place that let us know when those type of things happen, and to make sure that we get people in early, warning programs and those type of things. We all agree. We all agree that what happened in Minnesota was a crime, and a crime that needs to be punished. That has been uniform across, this entire country. But it does, speak to change in how we need to do things. As far as the union goes, they have a purpose, and they have, their responsibilities, which they feel they, must fulfill to the members of the department. And our relationship right now is probably as good as it can be and has been in many years. So that doesn't mean that, there are times where we're going to be on different sides of issues, and there are times where their interests are not the interest of the city, and those things are going to clash, and that's what they're there for. So but that doesn't mean, just because we disagree doesn't mean we have to be disagreeable, and that's truly where we're trying to work through that at this point. So.
Sure, but you also have the fear on the part of some folks that officers maybe who have been guilty of some kind of malfeasance are, through the collective bargaining contract, kind of shoved back down the throat of the command staff. You're going to keep this person on staff. They may not be a patrol officer, but you're going to keep them on the force, by gosh, because the union got involved. Does that happen?
If I could, Tom, this is Cynthia.
Cynthia, yes, go ahead.
Yes, if I could. Policing is an honorable profession. I'm the daughter of a former police officer. So we know that is a position of trust, and we hold our officers accountable. There will be times when officers act contrary to what is expected. And I can tell you, irrespective of union representation, we hold them accountable. We have made decisions when issues have come to our attention to terminate a relationship with the officer. They may have a right to go through the collective bargaining process, but nevertheless, if there's an interaction that we find to be inappropriate, inconsistent with our values and who we are, and that's not respectful to our community, we will hold our officers accountable. We will make that tough decision, and we have done it. And yes, we go through a process. And in some cases, maybe the officer has been returned to the force. But nevertheless, we take that step and we hold them accountable. Like the chief says, none of us, other than those in the organization, would resent more an officer to make a decision or take an action that reflects negatively on our community. We will hold them accountable, and we welcome the opportunity to bring on the public. That's been a part of the chief's original mission, to bring on the advisory board, to bring on a review board. We want to hear from the community. We want to engage the community. We do know that we cannot adequately address public safety in this community with police alone. It would take all of us to do that.
Thank you, ma'am. Let's go to City Attorney Cassandra Jackson, because this would fall pretty much under your bailiwick, the proposal for the Police Citizen Review Board, which I know some people in the community have wanted to be amped up to the point where there would be essentially hiring and firing authority that would be granted to such a board. And Cassandra, what does the City of Tallahassee Charter say about these kinds of organizations? And if people really, really want to change things, what would they have to do?
Well, first of all, Tom, I would like to say that the fact that the City Commission has moved forward based on the direction provided on June 17th to have this Citizen Police Review Board is a step in the direction of saying we want to see support from our public and their ability to interface involving some of these decisions regarding police officers. The board, as it is to be set up, it would be a 9-member board, representative of the community, representing the diversity of the community, that it would have the ability to review internal affairs investigations after those investigations are complete. That, as you spoke about the law, it is required that these reviews take place after they are complete because of the rights that are provided to police officers by the Florida statutes. But it does give the citizens the ability to look at all of the information and to give recommendations to not only the city manager, but the city commission, thus really elevating any concerns that the public may have. Again, with this proposed ordinance, they're going to be presenting an annual report that reflects their recommendations based on the information they have reviewed and the extent to which they may have disagreed with the direction taken by management. So again, there will be that opportunity to review, to provide some oversight in this regard regarding the actions of police officers. I think we all agree that the majority of police officers are great public servants. But this is an opportunity to say, let's look at what the policies and procedures are. Let's see if those policies and procedures need to be amended in some way and make the appropriate recommendations based on study and understanding of police policy and practice to the city manager, to the chief of police, or to the city commission.
And you talked about a selection process. How do the 9 members of the Citizens Advisory Board get selected? Who does that decision-making?
So the decision-making will be by the city commission, but there will be an opportunity to make application. As it's currently designed, each commissioner will make 1 appointment, so that'll be 5, and then 4 will come from various social and civic organizations.
Very good, thank you. Let's go to line 1. Anthony has been very patiently awaiting here on our Special Perspectives. Hi, Anthony. Welcome.
Hi. I just had a question directed at Chief Revell. During last night's Equality for Life panel hosted by the Village Square, you claimed that you have nothing to hide and that you and your department want to be transparent. If that's true, then why have you not advocated for the release of the body cam and dash cam footage of murders of Michael Johnson, Will Von Woodard, and Tony McDade by Tallahassee PD officers, which all occurred within less than 3 months earlier this year? And also, why have you not spoken out against the police union taking advantage of Marcy's law, a law meant to protect victims, which they are using to withhold the name of the cop who murdered Tony McDade and claim that the cop is a victim? You say you want to be transparent, but it seems your actions resoundingly contradict those words. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Anthony. Appreciate it. Chief Revell?
I thank you for those comments. I would disagree that that they are contrary to each other. Being transparent doesn't mean that our officers aren't afforded the protections that are given to them under the state statutes that are currently in place. And if we want to change those, then that's up to the community to do those. But as they currently exist, our officers are citizens and are afforded the same rights as any other citizen, and we've gotten that to where it needs to be with a court of law to decide those issues. And we will certainly abide by whatever those decisions are. So under the current laws as they exist, the protections that are in place under 119 and under Marcy's law, apply. And then until, again, those are changed or ruled differently, our officers are afforded that. So State Attorney Campbell has made it very clear that, his view, and I support that view, I agree with it personally, is that the grand jury needs to be the first one to see this evidence so that evidence is not tainted in any way, just like we wouldn't taint it with any other case that any other person in the country is afforded. So once all of that has been seen by the grand jury and the grand jury has made those decisions, then that information will become public and we can discuss those in detail. We can look at those and we will provide all of that information. But there is a process in place. And just because, we are abiding by the laws as they're currently stated doesn't mean we're not being transparent. In nearly every case, I believe that the video would help us and would show that our officers acted appropriately. So, there would be a case for us even wanting that information out there. But again, you've got to do what's right under the law and according to the Bill of Rights that the officers currently have. And in order to do that, the grand jury has to see this evidence first.
So, in other words, we are looking at a fairly complex situation. It's not just a simple matter of saying, well, we're going to, once an incident occurs, just release everything all at once. There are certain strictures that control what can be released when, that go beyond just, well, we're not going to tell you about it.
Correct.
Okay. Back to the phones we go. How about line 4 here on Perspectives? Dr. Ed's going to check in with us. Hi, Dr. Hollifield. How are you, sir? Hello, Dr. Hollifield.
How are you doing?
Hey, we're doing well. Good to hear your voice, sir.
Good program as usual, Tom. But, we need to get real here. To black people in the community, TPD has had the reputation of beating the hell out of black people for decades. This is nothing new. Couple of issues. Look at Dunn Street. This 60-plus-year-old grandma tased walking in the street that had no sidewalk. That officer should have been fired. But what happened to him? Very little. A minimal suspension, almost non-existent suspension, and he was back on the street. Another situation. Gentrification. Gentrification is taking place in Tallahassee like it's on steroids. And when these white people move into the black community, one of the first things they do is start calling the police on black people. They move in the community, and then they start calling the police on black people. So Revell needs to explain what black people are supposed to do when the police are called on them for just harassment.
Here we got a whole bunch of calls lining up right now, Doctor. Let's let the chief handle that, and then we'll get on to some, I think, related issues to what you were just talking about,
Hey,
Chief.
Tom, can I preface this statement, because I think, and it's good to hear from Dr. Hollifield. We hear from him often. I think his voice is welcome and constructive. What I will say is, and I think I would love the chief to comment about our community-oriented policing. So a couple years ago, maybe several years ago, we put a concerted effort into making sure we have police officers
in some of our communities, in particular in our bond community. That's a good example, to build relationships and make sure it's not just an enforcement element of policing, it's an engaged element of policing. And I think it goes right to the heart of what Dr. Hollifield is talking about. How do we interact as a police force with the community to build trust? And I want that to be known, because that's a priority and that's a direction to make sure the relationships, the chief alluded to it earlier, the relationships with our entire community are strong. It's not only an enforcement relationship, it's a constructive building relationship. So I don't know if the chief wants to add to that, but I think it gets right to the heart of Dr. Hollifield's comments.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Chief, if anything you want to expand on that the manager just said.
Yeah, I would just say that, community policing is a concept that's not just for one or two of our squads. And we are working hard to implement that for every single officer that we have. And that is getting out of the car. That is walking in the neighborhoods. That is, our PAL leagues and the things that we do in the community to set up opportunities for that public exposure of police to the citizens, and especially our youth, and the youth to police officers, and making that human. We have to work directly with our community to make sure that we're getting, that exchange of ideas and that exchange of culture and that exchange of thoughts and processes. So, when things happen, we deal with those, and we deal with those swiftly. But when these things happen, and a great example of that is, when one of our shootings happened, the officers that were known in that community and had relationships established in that community, exactly what we're talking about with community policing, is, in my opinion, the reason that wasn't more of an issue, because they said, look, I don't trust that officer standing over there, but I trust you because I know you and I know your name and I know you've been down here. And when we had, that's what we want for our entire city. We want the people in the community to be able to say, I know you. And if you're telling me, that this is going to be okay, then I'll believe you.
Thank you, Chief. And we'll continue the discussion in just a moment here on our special perspectives on the future of policing in Florida's capital city. You're invited to 850-414-1234 or drop us a line, perspectives@wfsu.org. Hey, a reminder, if you miss all or part of a Perspectives program, it is available online, not only on our WFSU.org website, but also our WFSU Public Media Facebook page. We try to have the most recent program up on both places as soon as we can after it airs on the radio, so you can hear, and in the case of Facebook, of course, actually see the program whenever you want. Talking Policing with City Manager Reese Goad, Deputy City Manager Cynthia Barber, Tallahassee Attorney Cassandra Jackson, and City Police Chief Lawrence Revell here on Perspectives. And let's head, let's see, down at the bottom of the screen, I think there is an email that we neglected to catch up on. Lydell, if you can just scroll down there for a second. Regarding the situation of Toyin Salo and Victoria Sims, their tragic death. Obviously, the killer has been arrested and admitted to his crimes in detail, but the full investigation from the time Salo's disappearance was reported to the time her body and Sims' body was discovered is unclear to the public. Once again, the full scope of TPD's investigation. Is there a timeline on that, folks? I'll throw that open to anyone. Are we going through, again, the state attorney's office? Do we need a grand jury on this situation, even though there has been an admission of guilt on the part of the suspect? Anything to add on this particular case?
Yeah, Tom, that is still an active open murder investigation that will go before the jury. The state attorney takes all murders before the grand jury for their indictment. So, that is ongoing. Again, I very much look forward to, once it's concluded, being able to show everything that TPD was doing and did do, and just to be able to assure the public that we did everything that we absolutely could do as quickly as we could have done it. So tragic outcome, obviously, for both victims and victims' families, but that is still ongoing.
Thank you, Chief Revell. Let's go to line one, where Will awaits here on our Special Perspectives program. Hi, Will. Welcome.
Hi there. Thank you all so much for taking my call. This issue is very important to me. I was participating in the demonstration on May 30th when a truck ran through the crowd and ran me over. I continued marching to the police station, where I waited for 45 minutes, and neither Revell nor Goad had the decency or the respect to come and listen to what we had to say. So I have two questions. One for City Manager Goad. The community selected a black man born and raised on the South Side to be our police chief, and it was your office's incompetence that led to him withdrawing his nomination. So I want to know exactly. I want to ask you if you take responsibility for that failure as the city manager, and what you plan to do to make sure nothing like that ever happens again. For Police Chief Revell, I want to know if you think we would be in this exact same situation with community mistrust of police if we had a black man born on the South Side of Tallahassee as our police chief, instead of a white man who has killed someone on the South Side, a white man who has killed a black man on the South Side. So those are my questions, and I'll listen off the air. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Let's go to the city manager first. Mr. Goad.
Thanks, Tom. I think I can answer this pretty quickly. Actually, the police chief selection process was the most transparent, most publicly engaged police chief selection process we've ever had. We impaneled a committee of about 15 citizens throughout our community to comb through the applications, which we had numerous very qualified applications, comb through those, make a short list, and in fact give me as the ultimate decision maker in the process a short list. They did. We offered the job. Antonio Gilliam is the person that's been referred to. He accepted the job. Ultimately, we couldn't come to a contract. I can't speculate as to why he didn't want to do that, but he did agree. And I can tell you that Chief Revell was part of that short list that was selected by the group of about 15 citizens, very well-respected citizens. He was placed in that group, and he deserved to be in that group. Chief Revell is an outstanding police officer and an outstanding chief, and I have full confidence in his leadership. And that's how the process works. So we engaged the public. They gave us a short list. It was very transparent. It was reported on the news over and over and over. There's never been a process more public than the one we did in this selection, and I feel very good about it.
All right. And anything you wanted to add on, Chief Revell, in response to the caller?
Yeah, I'll just add my opinion, and that is that I don't think a black male raised on the South Side or a white male raised on the South Side makes any difference. I think it's how that person that sits in this chair relates to all of our community, including the South Side, which Tony and I both grew up on and both love and both care about. I can assure you, Tony doesn't care any more about the South Side than I do. Not to say he cares any less, but we both grew up there. We both love that side of town as well as all of our town. But I have been here for 52 years. I've never left. This is where I want to be. And, when you police an area for 30 years, and the primary, patrol that I did was in the northwest portion of town, not the South Side. But I have a love for this entire community. And nobody loves this community more than I do. Nobody loves this department more than I do. And nobody wants to see this department and this community come together more than I do.
All right, sir. Before we move on, and we got a lot of calls and emails still coming in with us here on our special edition of Perspectives. If we could get up with City Attorney Cassandra Jackson for just a moment here in regards again to the Police Citizen Review Board as proposed and authorized by the City Commission. If folks want to be considered for that role, can they lobby? This is Tallahassee. We like to lobby in this town, but what's the proper protocol that you need to go through if you'd like to be included on this board, ma'am?
Well, once the ordinance has been passed that adopts the Citizen Review Board, there will be a process of application, and the clerk's office, as usual, will be the point of contact. And the application and resume can be provided. The application can be completed. Obviously, we want people on this board who are ready to be very engaged, want to see the unity that we all want to see between the police and the citizens. And so that will be the process. And then the City Commission will select from that list of folks who actually apply.
Okay, very good, ma'am. Thanks for filling us in on that. Let's go to line 2 where Bill is on hold. Hello, Bill. Welcome to Perspectives.
Thank you. I just have a brief comment about this idea that what local city governments are doing is even appropriate to respond to the needs of citizens. It's as if people were still selling typewriters and landline phones in an age where we have laptops and iPhones. The institutions in the local cities, and particularly the police department, being used as a multi-purpose service agency is ancient, it's antiquated, it's dysfunctional. And the idea that we would even talk about how we're going to use our typewriter and landline phones better in an age of iPhones and laptops is ridiculous. The reason the Tallahassee Police Department is one of the oldest in the country is because it was a slave patrol for Allegheny County in the city of Tallahassee. The relationship that this police department has had with the black community is one of terrorism and one of domination. And it needs to go away. There needs to be new institutions from the top down so that when we pick up the phone and ask the city that we are paying for to respond to our needs, they don't send people with guns who have a history of controlling us. Thank you.
Thank you for your call, Bill. We appreciate it. We are talking to the city manager of Tallahassee, Reese Goad, along with Deputy City Manager Cynthia Barber, Cassandra Jackson, who's City Attorney, and Police Chief Lawrence Revell. Before we move on, we have an email that is a little bit different in tone from some of the things we've been hearing today. Nicia says, I agree that there are bad apples everywhere. I wonder why we only point those out. I see and have seen great law enforcement work in this community. I would like to see our public officials support our law enforcement teams publicly for the great work they do. Our city officials need to respond even when it is not their proper or the popular response. And nobody wants to talk about the hard stuff and be part of the solution. Everyone has a responsibility, including the county commissioners, local leaders, city managers, city commissioners, etc. Have we looked at the allocation of officers? Do we need more? Maybe city officials need to have some local community meetings and get folks involved in their community and partner with the commissioners. And what are we doing to stop the violence that is occurring in particular areas of town? I appreciate our chief and officers that put themselves in danger every day. That is our last email here for this get together, and that gets us maybe Mr. City Manager, since you are one of the budgetary drivers of this whole thing. Do we need, instead of what you hear across the country, a defunding, a refunding or a diversion of funding in the Tallahassee Police Department to different types of entities or other units or whatever? Is that even possible given the current restrictions that we have on where we can go from here?
Well, I think it's an excellent question. It's a complicated question. And let me say, when I hear that discussion, what I hear is an allocation of resources for many different things. We know the goal of the Tallahassee Police Department is to keep our community safe. That is unbelievably complex. That can be measured ultimately in the most simple of measures is what level of crime do we have. Now, I can tell you that the police department's doing an excellent job driving violent crime down, but how do we make sure we have police officers that are well trained? How are they complemented? Maybe in our case, I can tell you, I created a new department last year, 2 new departments last year, in fact. Our community services department that houses our Tempo program. Cynthia Barber alluded to that earlier, that deals in disconnected youth. That could be the very members of our community that ultimately may find their way into a life of crime. If we can avoid that, it helps everybody. So how complementary is it? Is it part of the police department or is it a complementary department? We've been working on that. I think we continue to work on that. I think that's the essence of the question. But to go back to Nicia's comment as well, as how do we make sure we support the police department? How do we recruit good police officers? How do we, and I want to take this moment to say, how do we make sure our police department, every department in the city, ensure that its members look like our community, that it reflects the diversity of our community, whether it's in gender or age or race or sexual orientation? How do we make sure that it best represents our community? Because that helps us ensure a good culture to deal with the issues at hand and ultimately get back to the goal of making sure our community is as safe as possible. I know Cynthia has a lot of thoughts on this. We talk about it all the time because that's how you build a successful organization. Chief Revell has embraced those ideals, and I know he works toward that every day. But that, to me, it is complicated. It is complex as it relates to budgetary means, but also as it relates to establishing policy and direction.
Okay, well, Cynthia Barber, since it was kind of a handoff from the manager here, how do you go into, especially since Chief Revell is such a big advocate of community policing, go into certain areas and say, hey, we are actively recruiting folks from this neighborhood. So when a call for help comes, someone who is familiar with the folks in that area, who grew up there, who has a real personal connection there, can kind of go into the breach and perhaps have a better outcome than someone who's being called in from some other part of town who has little connection with that area.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm a product of that type of policing. We had our own, he was Officer Woodson in my neighborhood, would ride around the neighborhood and come and speak with us when there was nothing going on wrong in the neighborhood, just building that relationship. And I think while it's important to have somebody from that neighborhood, you can also achieve that by having someone who simply respects the neighborhood and who builds that relationship from the ground up. And I think it's important. We're doing that with our Neighborhood First program. We had indicated earlier that we cannot fix the public safety matters in our community alone, but how do you involve the community? And Bond is a great example where we've implemented our first full Neighborhood First plan, which with a complement of funding based on what the community has identified as priorities. And one of their primary issues was that of public safety. And they work to identify the issues and the concerns and the types of resources and programs that would be necessary. And Jackie Perkins, who heads that committee, has forged this relationship with the police department and with the sheriff department and other law enforcement officials, so that when we have issues in our community, they can call directly. They can help stand in the gap on those type of programs. And again, our Tempo program, building those relationships with our youth. 1,000 youth we've re-engaged in our community. And just yesterday, an historic graduation of 34 young people who had not earned a high school diploma, who were not working, or who were underemployed. How do you start to bring them into the process, hear their feedback, get their input, determine what kinds of programs and services not only that we can run, because police cannot do everything and neither can the government, but how we can turn these things over to the community and our community partners to help achieve those positive community outcomes.
Let me give everyone on the panel just a quick moment, if we could, as time draws short here, to summarize any final points that you might want to make. And since we're with you, Cynthia, go ahead. We'll throw it to you first. Any final thoughts you may have?
Yeah, simply that, again, I'm a native Tallahassean. I love this community. I've seen us rise to the occasion. In fact, we're doing it right now in the midst of a pandemic. The national conversation on law enforcement. I know without a doubt, with all of us working together, not sitting back and pointing to what somebody else can do, but if we can all come to the table and we are all open-minded about hearing the concerns and we work together, we can achieve those results that we want in our community, not only in law enforcement, but in general for our community, but certainly on the public safety perspective. We've got to get the people at the table who have the most concerns about the relationship with the police department.
Okay, we only have just a moment here. Cassandra Jackson, any final thought you may have, ma'am?
I would simply say that the City Commission is listening to the concerns that are being raised by citizens, and that they are developing through the Citizen Review Committee a process for citizens to be heard in a very important and meaningful way. And I would encourage those who are interested, who have the time to commit, to apply for the Police Citizen Review Board.
Thank you very much. Just a few seconds here, Chief Revell.
I'll defer to my boss for the last word.
Well done, sir. Good politician, too. Reese Goad, City Manager of Tallahassee.
Thank you, Tom. But we appreciate you having us today. I think it's a good conversation. I want to go back to Reed's point earlier about how we make sure we hold ourselves accountable, how we make sure the best rises to the top. I think the Citizens Review Board is a good step. I appreciate the leadership of the mayor and commissioners pushing in that direction. And we must continue to be a forward-thinking city department and find ways to add value. And I think we're headed there.
Very good. Thank you so much, Mr. Manager. And thanks to all the members of our panel and the amazing amount of feedback that we got from listeners today on this issue of Perspectives, which is produced by WFSU Public Media. Taylor Cox, Paul Dam, Amy Diaz de Villegas, Tricia Moynihan, and Lido Rawls in charge. I'm Tom Flanigan. Catch you next time.